Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites! This is episode 110.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
Alright, gentlemen, we are here for episode 110. We're back beginning of the month, and that is a history episode. What are we doing this week? This week, we are doing probably one of the least covered in popular historical writing and fiction people are going to be aware of, and that's the July 20 plot against Hitler. Operation Valkyrie. It's the name of the movie that Tom Cruise did. We've talked about that quite a bit in our show prep, about how much we actually like that. Even though we may not care for Tom Cruise himself all that much. Well, he does do some good stuff.
He does.
He does.
He did a fine job.
He's a
with
whack
that
job,
part.
though.
Well,
but he did do a fine job with that.
Well, it's ironic because he wanted that role, because if you look at his pictures and von Stauffenberg's, they are scary alike.
Yes, I noticed that.
He recognized that going in. He said, I want this role because I look like this guy. He does. And if you've seen the movie, 2008 was the year. Wow, it's good. And that might be the door you walk through on this. It's pretty accurate.
It is. It's one of those few movies about history that they actually bothered to get some good stuff right.
Yeah. Well, they had.
And I don't mind when movies take some liberties, because sometimes you have to.
Right.
But it was really good.
Well, there was a huge amount of German financing in this movie. Germany itself financed a huge portion of it because they wanted to show this. It's kind of like, let's set the record straight about us. It was almost like it's a purging some of that Nazi past.
Yeah.
And trying to say, not all of us were that. So
even though, as we talked about during the show prep, it wasn't exactly an entirely altruistic.
That's correct.
Well,
plot.
before we get there, though, let's set the stage.
Yeah.
It's important to set the stage. So, it's July of 44.
Right. D-Day is a month in.
Yeah, we're about 6 weeks in.
By the time you get to the 20th.
Yeah, by the time we get to the 20th, we're about 6 weeks in from D-Day. Now, the Allies have not really broken out of Normandy. The Normandy battle isn't over.
Right.
We haven't hit Operation Cobra yet.
Yeah.
That's the
breakout.
The bocage, they're still kind of hemmed in. Patton and the Third Army don't reach France until August 1st. But the Russians are coming. The Eastern Front against Stalingrad has destroyed the Wehrmacht in the east.
Yeah. Von Paulus has long since been captured, and the Sixth Army's gone.
Yep. And there's still this very small chance of dislodging the Western Allies off Normandy, and they are bottled up, but it's not looking good.
Right.
It's not looking good. So
they lost control of the two things that they needed to be able to keep Europe, and that's the sea and the air.
Yes. So
you need at least one of those.
Yeah. Yep. So the Allies do control the air. The breakout, I don't want to say it's just a question of time, but it's gonna happen. The breakout from Normandy is going to happen. Well,
once you get the attention in Normandy, you really do open up the rest of France for invasion. Yeah. So, you don't have to funnel everybody through those 5 beaches.
And eventually that would happen. That's Operation Dragoon.
Yes.
Coming in from the Mediterranean in France. And, of course, Italy. They're still tied down in Italy. The Allies are north of Rome. So it really is, now it's a 3-front war.
Right.
And the cream of your fighting men have been, like you said,
they're gone.
Stalingrad is so important because of that.
Yep.
The best and the brightest, so to speak, if you want to use that term, they're just gone.
That's right.
There's no replacing them.
And at this point, it's all about resource allocation for Hitler, because you can't be everywhere because you don't have the men. So you've got to figure out, where do you need them. And in many respects, that the July 20th, that meeting, that's what it was all about, is we need to move this here, there, that, etc., and all that.
Right.
That was the intention about that.
So that's the stage.
Right. And, that's the stage for the Germans, for the Hitler part of this. But I think what's really important to go even deeper in that background is understand this was not just a group of a handful of German generals and staff officers. This was actually a far-reaching, widespread plot. I was kind of surprised to discover that there were a number of resistance groups in Germany from well before the war started. And it involved not just military, but it involved some civil leaders as well.
Yes.
And this was so far-reaching that it actually involved the commander of the reserve. what we would call the strategic reserve now, National Reserve.
Yeah.
National
it was
Guard,
called
whatever you want to call it.
the replacement army, the reserve army.
Right.
They were set up, and originally Operation Valkyrie was a real German military plan, contingency plan for the loss of law and order inside Germany.
Civil insurrection.
Civil insurrection or the slave labor insurrection, that kind of thing. The idea was
of that.
The idea was to be able to call on this reserve army inside the borders of Germany to quell anything like that.
Yeah.
And that's what it originally...
And it was an army function. It was, as opposed to the SS, which was outside that, or the Gestapo, which were a police force in many respects.
Yeah.
So this is stems from the Wehrmacht, the army thing, and that's very important to understand this, because that's where a lot of the crucible for this is army officers who are disgruntled with the way that things are being done. They're hearkening back to the good old days of World War I in many respects, when. And before that, the Junkers and all that. Where
about 45 years from the establishment of Germany as a single nation again until World War I. I mean, it's the height of German power.
Exactly, and that's what they're reaching back to, because
most glory. More important.
I don't want to say most, but many of these folks, von Stauffenberg in particular, he is military aristocracy.
Well, he's a count.
He is a count.
He is literally a count.
That's
he is aristocracy.
Literally, it's both. And his family had served in the military from the beginning. They were officer corps. They were high-ranking, and that's one of the things that he brought to this was a credibility amongst that group of
and that's common throughout a lot of these conspirators. Erwin von Witzelben, Henning von Treschow, Klaus von Stauffenberg, those three little letters, VON.
That's right.
That's Prussian aristocracy.
Yeah. We especially in America, we lose sight of what that means.
Yeah.
But if you have von in front of your name, it just doesn't mean it's not the same as Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
Da Vinci's not his last name.
Yeah.
It's Leonardo of Vinci, Venice.
Yeah.
That's where he's from. And, von Stauffenberg, von Hessen, these are aristocratic names tied to the little principalities that they once ruled.
Right.
Yep.
So, especially during the Holy Roman Empire. So it is an elite in the sense of not just military, but it's societal and cultural.
Yes, cultural, societal.
The military came a little bit later.
Yeah, elitist, old school, in the European sense, conservative, not in the American political sense, but in the European sense, elitist, conservative.
The way things have always been.
Right. That's who these men were.
Yeah, restoring the societal order.
Let's talk a little bit about some of these men, just to give some of the names.
It's important because Stauffenberg's the one we know.
Yeah.
But there were others. None are as important as him. I'll grant you that.
Well, he's the spark plug.
He really does tie these various groups together. Gives them direction and clarity, really.
Yeah, because they were just... they were discombobulated. Other than that, they were fighting amongst themselves. They couldn't decide on anything. There was they needed a leader.
They wanted to put Hitler on trial if they could get him out. Which, in retrospect, you think, well, that's a dumbass idea.
Yeah,
because you think about what that would mean. First of all, if he's alive, his followers are not going to give up.
Yeah,
if he's dead, it's going to have a hard time getting him to give up. But if he's alive, then it's just not going to happen.
Forget it.
There's.
A couple of key people, Henning von Treschow, again, a old school Prussian officer.
He was really the leader prior to Stauffenberg.
Up until Stauffenberg's recruitment.
He was the thought leader on this. He had been working on this long before the war started.
Yes.
He is self-Prussian aristocracy. He served most of the time on the Eastern Front, which he thought was a great crucible because it's away from all the Berlin and all the intrigue and all the Gestapo and the SS. He can actually... It's just them out there. So he was able to recruit a lot of folks from that military to try and bring that into about. It played beautifully by Kenneth Branagh in the movie.
Those survivors from the Eastern Front are going to be the most disaffected.
That's right.
Because they were hung out to dry.
Yes.
Correct. And they were given both responsibility and blame for something that was not entirely their fault.
And they were very militarily focused.
Yes,
that's what they did. Most of them did not understand the Holocaust. Didn't even know it was going on in many cases because the SS was responsible for that. Von Stauffenberg.
But they knew the SS was following the Wehrmacht around.
That's correct.
Basically.
They knew something was going on. They didn't understand that because
those SS divisions
days,
were created specifically to keep the Wehrmacht in line. That is, when they created the military units for the SS, because the SS was a thing, but when they actually created frontline units, they weren't really frontline in the sense they were there to keep an eye on the other guys.
They were occupation troops,
yes,
so that the Wehrmacht can continue conquering.
Well, not just that, but I mean they were there,
yes,
to keep an eye on everybody, not just the occupation troops.
Right.
But
in the early days of the
multiple functions
of the invasion east. There was no such thing as camps yet because everything's on the move, and most of the Holocaust victims came from those conquered territories, particularly Ukraine was huge because it was full of Jews and gypsies and all those non-desirables and all that. And at first, until they were able to pacify the area, they were basically going in and shooting them, mass graves. And of course, that became to be the reason they stopped that is because that's wasting bullets that you need, believe it or not. Yeah. And but those things were witnessed at times, and that's kind of what pinged Tresco and others, saying, "Wait a minute, there's more going on here than we realize. We're kind of focused forward. If you turn around and look behind you and see what's going on, you're like, wait a minute, there's more here." They didn't quite get it, but von Stauffenberg was in a position because he rises very quickly after his wounding, which we can talk about.
Yes.
That. I know that's where you're probably trying to get.
Right. Well, I want to mention Friedrich Olbricht.
Yes.
Another important
huge.
A general in Berlin.
Yes.
Also very disaffected in this cell, along with Tresckow. Ludwig Beck, another important.
He was probably the highest ranking.
He was field marshal.
He was a field marshal. He was the one that was going to become head of state in the new order of all that.
That's how far they had this plan too. That's something to this is not a you got nothing better to do. Let's go kill Hitler.
Yeah. Well,
the Germans always cross the T's and dot the I's.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's very much the Russians may not take a dump without a plan, but by God, neither do the Germans.
And the Germans write down the plan.
That's right. The Germans write it down.
And Beck he's
in triplicate.
The movie portrayed him. Terrence Stamp played him so well. Oh my God, it's just amazing the pathos that man brings. And you might remember Terrence Stamp as General Zod from Superman 2. But he chewed a lot of scenery there. The man's acting chops are fantastic, and he played him so well in here. Because he was he was kind of the father figure of all of this. He's the one they all looked to for, should we do this?
Yeah.
Stauffenberg's the one that says, can we do this? And how? Yeah. And he was one of the ones that kind of, the glue that their hope, pinning on what do we do after? Because Stauffenberg, he was one of the first things that came in and says, now what are you going to do? Okay, so you want to get rid of Hitler. Then what?
Then what?
And that's what they had never bothered to do. It was all about, conquest is easy, control is not. Thank you, James T. Kirk. That's what you kind of got to figure out.
Right. So, in addition to some of the names you already mentioned, one of the things I found interesting was Helmuth James von Moltke.
Mm-hmm. The great
grandnephew,
grandnephew
of Moltke the Elder, who we have talked about,
absolutely,
on our show before. So again, just goes to show you that the tradition and the lineage that these guys had.
And they're trying to recapture
so
that.
Many of these guys are, tied to the past. This is not a disaffected bunch of rabble-rousers.
Right.
This is not Occupy Wall Street trying to get up a plot, which, we saw how well that went.
Yeah, it's not Chaz.
So,
well,
exactly.
There's not a lot of progressive, forward-thinking, we are the moral center of everything. There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Some of that's out there.
It's not so much a moral center as it is just we are the rightful top.
Yeah.
Yes. This is where we belong.
Yeah.
Right.
This guy is a usurper.
Yes.
Of our tradition.
Yes. As Martin put it in the show prep, this Austrian peasant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I have always found fascinating about the rise of Hitler is that he's not German.
Right.
He's Austrian.
That's right.
Although Hitler had and again, it's the same sensibility as a lot of these generals of that greater Germany.
Yeah, Germany.
That hearkening back to the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Because the Holy Roman Empire was primarily German, Central European. So you look at Germany, Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, all of this from Italy up to the North Sea,
all the way to the Baltic,
was controlled by various German groups. The Hohenzollern was the last family to do it.
Right.
But as a matter of fact, one of the Hohenzollerns was an early supporter of Hitler, who then became one of the ones that wanted to get rid of him.
Right.
So, I mean, this is not a small thing, which is what I find fascinating in that it managed to get this far.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because
we think of Germany in World War II, it's such the Gestapo and the SS are just so fearsome and so controlling. It's hard to believe in many ways that this was even able to get off the ground.
Because they were those who did this were ethnically pure. If you
you were
you were left alone. But in many cases, there was some reality to that because they're the ones that are fighting the war.
Yeah, but also when you think about the sheer number of people, a secret is easy to keep between 2 or 3 when 2 of them are dead.
Yeah.
I mean that's
right.
But when you have this many people, to have it kept secret for so many years, because this is not it's not a fly by night operation, and it's so many people in different cities, different groups, different circles within the army. It's in a way it's amazing that they didn't succeed, and it's amazing that they didn't get caught.
Yeah,
earlier.
Well, and again, when these old school Prussian officers had kind of a bond to each other.
Yes.
So
that's
even
probably a good deal of it. Yeah.
Even when one of these conspirators might approach someone and try to recruit them in, and that person wavered or hesitated, they still didn't turn in the conspirators.
That's right, because they were...
I mean, Tresckow never got turned in, even though he'd been recruiting since the 30s.
That was one of the
things... So nobody ever went to the Gestapo and said, hey... Now, Hitler was always suspicious of these generals anyway. He hated all of them.
Right, because he was an Austrian peasant, and he knew that they didn't like it.
And that's part of his ethos, is that they're the ones who screwed all this up in World War I anyway.
Yeah. It's a closed shop. It's a boys-only club, and you can't really get into that. But Hitler overrode them, and he knew that there was resentment.
Well, his power was not the aristocracy.
Nope.
And that's the thing.
Yeah,
it was the masses.
But it's what you just talked about, how none of these people got turned in until basically the plot failed.
Yes.
I found extremely fascinating.
Yeah.
Because there were so many people that knew about it, knew about the attempt to be recruited, but didn't say anything. Because I think he even went to Rommel and tried to recruit him.
And Himmler even had
yes.
some approaches and never really turned... Because he was like, well, you know, hey...
I'd be next if he goes.
Next. Yeah, that's right. So, you know, lots of...
as long as he's not targeted, he probably thought it wasn't a bad deal. Because at some point, somebody like Himmler also had to realize, this guy's a maniac. He's got to go. And somebody like Himmler thinks Hitler's a maniac, somebody else is a maniac. You know things are bad.
Oh yeah, that's bad.
Because he was nuts. I mean, they were all psychopaths.
We just to round everything out. I mean, we mentioned again Beck and again there are civilians involved like Karl Gordler, Tresckow, Ulbricht. Stauffenberg again is the spark plug. He's the key. Again, he's an old school Prussian officer. He's substantially wounded in North Africa. Loses a hand, a couple of fingers, and an eye. So he's got a gripe. He's disaffected.
And he was already such before he went there. That's one of the reasons he was sent to North Africa. Is because he was outspoken against Hitler. Yeah. And that's what got him sent there, which almost killed him. But that kind of that wounding washed away a lot of that negativity that was associated with him after the fact.
Yeah.
And there's a moment in the movie when he actually meets Hitler early on, and Hitler says, "This is what," he says to the room full of his advisors, which probably is a bit of apocryphal. He says, "This is what we want. This is the guy. This guy. I wish we had everybody was like this guy.
He was the hero.
He was the hero of the Reich." And that's one of the reasons that he was able to gain access and rose so fast. His wounding, in many respects, put him in a position he would have never gotten otherwise.
Well, and
make that state.
Being wounded in service of the country gives you a lot of leeway in the sense that you're obviously a patriot.
Yeah.
So
right.
And he was a German nationalist,
right,
a very strong German
nationalist.
nationalist.
And that's the funny thing, from our perspective, when you plot to overthrow the government, that obviously automatically makes you a traitor. Mm-hmm. And no, I am not referring to anything that has happened recently. I'm just talking about in general.
Yeah.
And yet these guys all consider themselves, and probably most people will consider themselves, patriots, German, granted German nationalists, but they were looking out for what they thought was the best for the country. Now, granted, they thought what was best for the country was for them to be in control.
Well, they had
but most people who plot to overthrow their own government think that.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to overthrow the government to give it to somebody else. It's going to be. Let's be realistic here.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things you really have to understand that I think most of us don't is they had a realistic plan for taking over the whole government. They had a whole org chart set up for who was going to take all the spots.
Who was going to be president? Who was going to be chancellor, vice chancellor, secretary
and they were
of state.
using this reserve army to essentially take over everywhere.
So that's a good
Berlin
spot
in particular.
then to actually give the events then of July 20th.
Well, one thing I was going to point out before we get to July 20th, and we sort of alluded to this, this was not the first attempt. Mm-hmm. There were 5 attempts between March 1943 to March of 1944 that failed for one reason or another.
They were not caught.
Right, they were not caught. They just didn't work out.
Exactly. Either it didn't work, like the time
Tresckow put a
bomb on the plane, which would have changed everything if it had gone off. Because that's done. It's over with. That was
the one that had Hitler, Goering, and Himmler all on the same plane,
which was
that would have guaranteed success.
The trifecta.
That's right. That's what. And if that had gone off, that would have been something totally different. But it didn't. That was early. That was Tresckow. He didn't really have an organization. He wasn't planning on taking over the government. He just wants these guys gone. In those early stages, it morphs later, and Stauffenberg's the one that comes in and says, "No, wait a minute. You can't just kill him.
Yeah.
You have to have a plan for the vacuum that will be created, and you also." And they push back, saying, "Well, you've got to get Himmler, you've got to get Goering too, because they're going to come right in afterwards, and it's the same old, same old."
And that is probably that. Initially, that desire to get all 3 is probably ultimately what caused it to fail, because they had a good opportunity earlier on, and they backed out
they told Stauffenberg to back off because Himmler wasn't there, because, again, what's the point of killing Hitler if a monster like Himmler is going to take over?
Right.
But
which is debatable.
Stauffenberg eventually says, we're just going to have to deal with that. We've got to kick this off.
Well, and also at that time, that was in June when a lot of that happens, and there were rumors going around that the SS was... they were under suspicion.
They were closing in.
They were closing in. They realized, we don't have another shot at this. That's one of the first things we think about is, wait a minute, didn't they go too fast? Shouldn't they have waited?
No, they went too slow.
They'd already done that. They'd already choked too many times.
And again, that's
the time was over.
Stauffenberg being the spark plug of saying, 1, a trial is not realistic. We're going to have to kill him. 2, don't worry about the other ones. And 3, what's the plan?
Yeah.
Tresckow then takes the Operation Valkyrie contingency plan and they rewrite it.
Right, absolutely.
And sneak in this idea we can use this apparatus under the command of Frederick Fromm to then do a military coup, arrest the SS leaders, and take over.
Which was what Valkyrie was all about anyway, in case you had to do that. So they were going to use basically the Germans' love of planning against them. That's what that came out to be.
So you get to July 20th. Hitler doesn't stay in Berlin.
Right, he has not been in Berlin since the major bombing.
He's meeting with his top-level generals, either in Berchtesgaden or in Rastenburg, called the Wolfslair.
Yes.
In East Prussia. So, because of the promotions and things, Stauffenberg has access to Hitler.
Yeah, he's chief of staff
to Fromm.
Yeah.
So that gives him access then to be in these meetings.
Because that's what they're talking about, is we've got to reallocate a lot of these resources. So that puts him in the position to do all this.
Right, and this is probably one of the last times they would have had an opportunity, because when you think about where we are, July 20, 1944, that replacement army is going to be called up very soon.
That's right. It's
because that's the last reserves they have.
That's right. And I
so
think
if you don't do it now, you don't have a shot at it.
And that's what I think that was another one of those reasons for the urgency.
Yeah.
And the reason that they didn't, because when we get into the day itself, there were like 3 things that that happened that shouldn't have happened. Von Stauffenberg, looking back at it now, we say, why didn't he just abort and do it later? Because this didn't happen. This happened. So like that. And wisdom says that now, but you have to understand how pinched they were for time. They recognize the clock is against them.
Well, and once you start, it's very difficult to stop.
Right.
You get caught with the explosive on you.
Right.
But basically, yes, Stauffenberg flies from Berlin to Rastenburg. He has the bomb and the detonators, and it's
2 bombs.
2 bombs.
Yes, and that's right. That is one of the things, again, one small thing makes a difference.
That's 2 loads of explosives.
Like 10 little small things that really...
If you got both bombs in that room,
that's right.
Probably would have done the job.
Exactly, but he didn't have time based on what happened.
Well, no. That one wasn't a time. They couldn't get the second bomb armed.
Well, that's right, because...
Well, he's having so much... Again, he has to dress with 3 fingers, is all he has.
Yeah, so he's not able to do both.
He gets to Rastenburg. He has the explosives in his briefcase. He has an adjutant, von Heften. He excuses himself, goes into a room.
Right, says, I'm sweating so much. Because, again, that's why they're up in the conference room.
Right.
Yeah, he's going to change clothes. That's their moment to arm. But they get interrupted, a knock on the door. Hey, the meeting started. You've got to get in there.
Yeah,
they only had time to arm 1 bomb.
That's right.
It's a British design. They crush this capsule, and acid eats the wire and keeps the priming pin apart from the cap. And
It's supposed to be a 30-minute timer, but they understand because of this heat, you might have 15.
Yeah, if you're lucky, you got 15, but probably 10. So you're gonna have to place the bomb and then get out.
Right.
So he places the bomb, and again, this July heat, they're not in the accustomed place, which is usually an underground bunker, concrete walls. They said, no, let's have it in the hut and open the windows. So Stauffenberg places the bomb near Hitler under the desk, or under the table, this huge conference table, and another officer moves it to the other side of the table legs.
Yeah. Right, and you say table leg, but it's really one of these flat panel kind of a thing.
Yes.
A regular table leg would not have stopped this bomb.
Right.
So, I mean, the table in the movie, I assume, is relatively historically accurate. It's huge, it's thick.
Yeah.
This table leg is this
like
partition.
A partition. Yeah, it's a solid partition.
So that, basically the guys on the other side, that were directly exposed to the bomb, they took that's where most of the casualties are.
Yeah.
That's right.
Although, if you look at the picture of the pants that Hitler was wearing,
yes,
they were shredded.
Shredded.
Oh, yeah,
so it's amazing he did survive.
Yeah, and had this been in the bunker like it was originally intended, where it was all the explosion was self-contained, no one would have survived. They would have shredded.
Turned them
Even
into
one
jelly.
bomb would have done it.
Yeah,
right.
The pressure wave would have turned them all into jelly. But it's above ground. The pressure wave blows the windows out instead. But Stauffenberg, he places the bomb, and then gets a prearranged signal call, that there's a phone call for you, Colonel Stauffenberg. So he leaves.
He gets the hell out.
The explosion happens. He bluffs his way off the base.
Right.
Basically, out the checkpoints.
And he sees the explosion happen, and he sees, this was not in the movie, but he sees a body being carried out with what he thinks is Hitler's coat over top of it as he's pulling out. And he thinks that's it.
He thinks
dead.
he's been a
He's
success.
pretty certain in his mind that that's Hitler and he's dead. That's one of the reasons he moved out quickly.
Right. And he has the communications officer at Rastenburg. Feldgabel is part of the conspiracy.
Yep.
So he's calling Berlin, says it's on, do it.
Shuts down the communications from the outside world.
And so Stauffenberg returns to Berlin. They dispose of the bomb remains and the pliers and all that in the woods. But by the time he returns to Berlin, word has gotten out, Hitler survived.
Right. There's conflicting information.
That's right,
because he's insisting to the conspirators back in Berlin, no, I watched the explosion.
Yeah, I saw the body,
happened.
and he didn't. It was not what he thought it was.
Yeah.
And that's where the conflict came in. Because of his insistence, he's moving forward, and yet word is coming out. Wait a minute. No, they didn't.
Right. And in his mind, he had to have expected this because, of course, whoever survives that
That's correct.
is going to say, well, of course Hitler's alive.
That's right.
Because you don't want to cause panic if you're a Hitlerite.
Right.
Yeah.
So he just thought this was business as usual.
He's telling the rest of the conspirators, no, Hitler's dead. Kick off Part 2, Operation Valkyrie. Kick off. From, though, his signature is necessary to activate the reserve army. So they lock him in a closet, forge his signature, and get this going.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things, Fromm was approached to join the conspiracy. He's a massive opportunist.
Yes.
Major.
But Tom Wilkinson plays him so evilly. Oh, my God.
And so he's kind of amenable, but he basically tells them, I always come out on the right side. Yeah. Meaning, I'll saw you off the limb if I have to. Yeah. I'll always come out on the right side.
Yeah.
And especially after one of the failed attempts, he tells them, ooh, no more, guys. You all screwed this up.
Yeah, because they actually activated the army, the reserve army, as part of this failed attempt. They played it off as a drill, but they didn't get his approval. Ulrich just did it. He's the deputy commander. He just did it on his own, and he said, you ain't never going to do that shit again.
No.
I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm not going to let you do it.
Yeah.
Which, again, the opportunist, because if he had turned them all in, he'd have been a big hero, but he'd have been better off under the new regime as well.
Well, they were going to appoint him. Part of trying to suck him into the conspiracy was appointing him as commander-in-chief of the Wehrmacht.
Right.
And he had a huge hatred, and they show this slightly in the movie, but Field Marshal Keitel, von Keitel, was promoted above him, and he never got over that. And they had an awful, awful rivalry, and he said, anything that screws Keitel, I'm in on. I want that. So there was other motivations
there's a huge part. Again, emphasize these guys aren't angels. This motivation isn't sweetness and light and making up for all these crimes. It's all really personal.
Yeah, it is.
It's we're tired of taking orders from this Austrian corporal. He's an idiot. We need to put ourselves back in charge.
These guys are the professionals.
Yeah.
They know the mistakes that he's making.
Yeah.
And the failure of them in the assassination attempts, especially this one, though, guarantees the eventual literal destruction of Germany as a nation.
Right.
Because Hitler takes full control. He starts making absolutely all the decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's not
thousands of executions.
7,000 arrests.
And 4,500, almost 5,000 executions. And that includes family. At this point, Himmler or Goering had instituted the blood libel laws.
Yeah, that's a Himmler thing for the SS. And
they basically said, if you're guilty, so is your family.
Yeah, and von Stauffenberg is fortunate that his family were not accused, and they did survive the war.
His wife survived.
He got them out of the country, got them somewhere safe, basically.
Right, because he knew that was coming.
Yeah, he had the foresight to plan for failure, even.
Right,
because he knew that if it didn't go on, I mean, all of the main conspirators were going to get killed.
That's right, and that whole rest of that day, he's basically assuming command. He's the only one, and the movie shows this very, very well. Tom Cruise pulls it off so well. Nobody else has the will, the vision, or the commitment to make this happen. The balls, that's exactly. And everything goes through him. Ulrich is going through him, even though he should kind of be in charge of this.
Well, theoretically, Fromm should have been at the front.
Correct. And since they've removed him, Ulrich is his deputy.
Right.
So
and at the end, Fromm is the one who ends up literally and figuratively killing it all, because once he realizes that when Hitler comes out and says, I'm alive, guys.
Yes.
It was just several hours, because he's...
But he goes on the radio with his voice, and of course everybody knows it.
Yeah.
So at that point...
Fromm gets a call from Rastenberg, and the call is, where's Stauffenberg?
Yeah.
And so Fromm knows this has now been traced back to my staff. My people.
Yeah, can't have that.
So he turns on them.
Yeah, he turns on them. He's told, Stauffenberg alive. Because they know that, because obviously he's the guy, one guy who left.
Right.
And they want him alive
well,
because I'm sure they want to interrogate him.
Yeah, Hitler wants all the conspirators alive. He gives orders to, what is his name? It's a major.
Major Brandt. Colonel Brandt.
No,
Reamer. Yeah, it's not Reamer.
Otto Remmer.
Remmer. I knew
Otto,
it was
Remmer. Otto Remmer.
Otto Remmer. Yeah.
He's the one who is ordered, take control back of Berlin. I want all the conspirators alive.
Yeah.
So I can kill him later.
Yeah. Fromm outranks him, so Fromm says, nope, we're going to convene an emergency, immediate military court-martial, and guess what? They're all guilty. Go shoot them in the courtyard right now.
Right now.
That's
right now.
Before they can say anything.
Before they can... And he's covering up his own waffling.
Exactly, because he always comes out on top.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't last, because eventually he is found out, and he himself is hung in March or April of 45.
45.
Irony of ironies, a month before Stalin hits the gates,
Yeah. So, the plot fails. Stauffenberg and the gang are all executed.
Well, a lot almost didn't. I mean, if all those things that had happened, if the second bomb had been there, if they hadn't moved the case, if they had been in the bunker, it would have done clean sweep. It would have been over with.
The one thing that they didn't have the foresight to plan for, and this is, it's partially the circumstances. You didn't see an actual body. But more importantly, you didn't have a military presence at the Wolf's Lair to take control.
Well,
I'm glad you
mentioned that, because it goes back to the thing. Stauffenberg is the only one who had access, but he's also the only one with balls back in Berlin to make it all happen there. And he can't be at two places at once, so he has to do the one, leave, go back over there. If Ulrich or whoever had some gumption to them, and had been able to take control, Stauffenberg could have stayed. He would not have been suspected. At least not immediately.
He could have played it off.
He definitely played it off.
He could have charged back and said, "What happened? What happened?"
Absolutely. But he had to get back.
He had to
get
back.
Otherwise, the second part wouldn't have happened. So trying to put him in two roles.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because if he had stayed,
he
could have seen Hitler's alive.
That's right.
Call off the stuff in Berlin.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, if he had a military presence, and I don't mean just himself, but you needed troops on the ground. I mean, as we all know, you don't win anything until you have troops on the ground.
Yeah, and
because he didn't have anybody to take control of the situation there to make sure that Hitler died.
Yeah, that's
right. One way or another. Because he may have been in control if he had stayed, but there were enough higher ranking. I mean, he wasn't the lowest ranking man there probably, because I'm sure there were a few aides lower than him.
Yeah,
but of all the general staff officers, he would have been one of the lowest.
And you're talking about SS security here. You're not going to get past that. You've got to work within that.
Yeah. So
they had 3 levels of security just to get to the actual Wolf's Lair.
Yeah. Right. So bigger bomb, second bomb, either one would have helped.
Yeah.
Changing. I mean, we have talked about this sort of thing practically every historical episode we've done, especially around war, because war is where it is most clear.
Want of a nail.
Want of a nail.
That's
for
right.
For want of a shoe, for want of a horse. I mean, it's just so many things.
A horse, my kingdom for a horse.
Same thing. Chamberlain doesn't get to the top of Little Round Top in time.
Yeah.
Doesn't decide to charge after they run out of ammunition. So many different things can go wrong. And when it goes right, it's almost more miraculous. Because, I mean, we think of this, oh my God, how could this go wrong? So many things had to fail. No. So many things have to go right.
Yeah. It's it.
Any one of those things fails, and it's a disaster.
And that's exactly
it just so happened with this.
There were several. That
failed. Plus, you had people that you couldn't trust that you had to rely on. Like Fromm.
Yeah.
So,
Robert, this is a good spot for a break, man.
Yeah, we should have done our bourbon break a little while ago, because it's a little bit late for that. Let's get into that. Man.
We're at 38, so...
Yeah. So, this is as is so often the case, we almost never have an actual bourbon for the history episode. Because we like to get together early in the day to start recording. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we had to get together a little bit earlier today, because we're under some time constraints. And again, not being day drinkers, at least not during a work day. Or at least when it's not a work day, we're not day drinkers. for those of us that work at home.
That's right.
I don't know. If Francis pours me some more of this good coffee, I may slip a little something into it.
Oh, there you go.
Go right ahead.
There you
Yeah.
go.
And if you were of the mind, my middle daughter gave me some Russell's.
Oh, no, not that in the coffee.
You don't want to put that? Oh,
No.
You want to get the cheap stuff over there?
Yeah, you would put the makers in the coffee.
Oh, okay. We could do that. Actually, I think there's some old granddad downstairs that I keep for my lush brother-in-laws. There's probably a little bit of that around. So if you want some of that, I can fix you.
So-
That's not a problem.
We just passed Father's Day
That's right.
when we're recording this, and I got a 3-pack of different kinds of bourbon from my kids, and there were half-size bottles, the 375 milliliters, not the 750s, which is fine. So there's a bottle of 9-year Knob Creek, which is very nice.
Oh, yes.
That's going to be so good.
Bottle of Basil Hayden's,
Oh, yes, one of our
which
favorites.
is always good.
Absolutely.
And what I'm really looking forward to try the next time we get together, because next time we record the next month's episodes, we'll be at my place. We'll be at Studio R in the atrium. We are, by the way, I didn't even mention this. We are in Studio F in the Baxter Building.
Yes, we are. Yes.
So that's where we are today.
It's a glorious day, I might also mention.
Yes.
We're just fresh from breakfast. And listeners, I know this probably doesn't mean anything in audio, but the route between Studio M and Studio F is not long, and it's side roads, back roads.
Yes.
Yeah.
Convoluted in certain ways.
But
yes.
it's this awesomely undeveloped area of our town. So it's just glorious to be driving around in the morning, the windows down. I had Rainbow pumping on the satellite radio.
Oh, yeah.
And just, there's like a working cattle farm between Studio
it's
M
one of
and
the
Studio
last
F.
undeveloped areas of this county.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so it was just glorious morning.
Yeah. It really is. The only thing that would have made it better was a few less clouds, and that's it. It is a fantastic morning.
And we all had breakfast in our merch. We are
We
wearing
did.
our
We were wearing
Snakes
our
and
Snakes and
Otters
Otters
merch.
merch. Yeah. Advertising.
Everybody did their laundry on time. See?
That's right. But we're in Studio F. Next month at Studio R, I'm going to break out these 3 bourbons. The one I'm really looking forward to trying is, oddly enough, a Jim Beam. This is not one I think we've ever had.
No, we haven't.
Any Jim Beam, but this one is an extra aged. Was it Black Label? Black Label, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. That's a beer, but it's a black something or other.
But it's I've never seen this bottle before.
Right.
So I'm expecting a higher quality than a standard Jim Beam. And again, even a bad bourbon is still bourbon.
Yeah, Jim Beam just hasn't been featured only because it just hasn't.
Right.
We
tend to go for the more exotic and more upscale.
Some of that. It's just there's so many bourbons out there. My
There
lord,
are.
We've guaranteed ourselves longevity and sustainability because we got plenty more to try.
Yes, I always like it when we can bring a new bottle of bourbon.
Well, that's correct, and that's what we're going to be getting to when the time comes.
Also have it sitting at the house for next time. Just kind of whet your appetites, boys. I have an unopened bottle of 1792 small batch.
Oh yeah, they're always good.
And I also have an open bottle because I opened it and had a drink with my daughter on Father's Day.
Yeah, of course.
A Four Roses small batch.
Okay.
So this is a step up from the standard Four Roses we've been drinking.
Right.
And I gotta say, I cannot sing the praises of the Four Roses distillery anymore. It's not possible to do it justice because that starter bottle, that $20 bottle of bourbon. You tell somebody who's a bourbon aficionado, here, I got a $20 bottle of bourbon for you. They're gonna, can't we do something better?
Gee, thanks. Yeah.
That's for a bourbon snob. But if you give it to them and you have them taste it, this is a great bourbon. And this small batch version is even better.
Oh, yeah.
And it still is a low priced. It's I used to say that the double oaked was your best dollar value. Because it is a really smooth.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, sitting right over there, yeah.
But even this small batch is still half the price of the double oaked. And it's just as good a quality, in my opinion. I still like the double oaked a little better.
You've got quite a list. I don't know. I won't be able to choose.
Well, if we do all 4 episodes, you do one of each. And then, revisit one. Well, you've already had the Basil Hayden.
Well, I know, but you got just said, I want to try that Four Roses small batch. I've been talking about that for a while. I want to try that Jim Beam.
The 1792.
The 1792.
Now we used to drink that all the time.
The Knob Creek 9 year. Oh, that's going to be. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, we've had 1792.
I don't know if we've had we didn't do the small batch.
No, not the small batch.
But we used to drink 1790. That was our original after the Basil Hayden go-to bourbon. Because Basil Hayden we couldn't afford back in the day when we first got started.
That's correct. That's right. Yeah, because it was $30 a bottle, which was like wow. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's still only about $35 now, which is that's a good mid-range price for such a good bourbon.
Yeah. It's still one of our favorites.
So yes, for new listeners, if you can't tell, we really like our bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
and we like breakfast.
And we like breakfast.
Yeah, so, boy, do we like breakfast.
We had breakfast today at, as I have been calling it in the emails, Der Waffle House.
That's right. Well, it's very appropriate for the subject that we're talking about. We're speaking enjoyment.
It's a good breakfast, man. It's just such a great way to start your day. And I don't mean a bowl of cereal.
No, real breakfast.
Real breakfast. Hot breakfast.
That's right. Hot.
I mean, you throw in some eggs, some hash browns, some bacon or sausage, and some gravy on top. Because as we all know, what's the answer when you say, "Would you like some more gravy with that?"
Oh yes,
yes,
yes, please,
yes, please. It's not. I mean, if I'm going to rank my breakfast places, I'm going to go Biscuit Belly,
the official breakfast place.
The official breakfast place, yes.
Absolutely.
I've not been to Wild Eggs, so I can't throw that one in yet.
Very good.
It's very
good.
I
hear that's excellent.
Yeah, it is.
But of the ones I've been to, I like my Biscuit Belly. I like IHOP. Because you get a massive amount of food and a good variety there.
They do a very good job.
That country fried steak for breakfast over there is some good stuff.
Hey, T-bone steak and eggs, baby.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great stuff.
Waffle House. It's a good place for breakfast.
It is. Oh, yeah.
So,
very friendly. We had a good experience.
And other good news here close to Studio M and Studio F is Heine Brothers.
That's correct.
Is
coffee
moving
shop.
in a little drive-through coffee place.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, right next to the Waffle House, right where we were.
Fantastic. I always like it when the smaller places.
Yeah, the local stuff, because the Heine Brothers is exclusively local. I'm pretty sure.
Is it?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's.
I knew it's been here forever because it was around when we were in college. Remember, Bashford Manor had one.
That's right. It was. They were a coffee place before there were coffee places.
Right. Before Starbucks was even a name here.
That's right. Yeah. Starbucks was a character on Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
That's all it was in those days.
Yes. And of course, we also like the Sister Beans.
Well, that's very true.
Talk about
local
stuff.
Places. Yes, that's right.
So I'm really looking forward to the Heine Brothers place opening up, because Heine Brothers is Biscuit Belly's coffee supplier.
It is. Yes.
So it's very
local, man. You can't beat that.
I'll be driving past it every day.
And I want to say that Heine Brothers might be where Sister Beans gets their coffee. I have to double check that.
They've been established here for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And they've expanded locally only.
Yeah.
To I don't know how many locations they have.
It seems like they've been expanding more in the last few years, because
right.
they were
good for them.
Not a big name for a while. It seemed, because Starbucks took the nation by storm.
Well, and then they had capital to burn too.
Yes.
They kind of focused on Heine Brothers. I think does a lot of more of. Not their own places, but distributing to local restaurants.
Yes.
That's
providing coffee.
That brings
a way to
brings the capital in to allow you to expand in a responsible manner.
Bring your own place.
Well, and the buy local thing has really picked up in recent years, which is a great thing. There's some things you can't buy local on. You can't buy local when it comes to your cell phone. It's just not possible.
That's right.
There's certain things you can. Mm-hmm. And if I can, I'm willing to pay a little bit more, because I have a little bit more disposable income than 25 years ago when I was younger.
That's kind of the way it's supposed
to be.
So
like to have a little bit more disposable income, but that's another thing.
No.
So, anyways, back to the Valkyrie plot.
Yes.
So, we've pretty much gone through to where all of the players have been. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on that 12 hours or so post-explosion, but essentially there was a lot of chaos, conflicting information. Ultimately, these guys fail because Hitler comes on the radio.
Right.
And then it's done.
That's correct.
Fromm throws them to the wolves, has them arrested, gets Stauffenberg executed so that he can save his own ass. And once Stauffenberg is executed, your primary source of a lot of the planning and execution is gone.
Yeah, Ulbricht's executed. Tresckow commits suicide.
So is Beck.
Beck commits suicide.
So the top guys are gone immediately.
Yeah.
So then it's a witch hunt.
Oh, and that's
and if the SS and the Gestapo were anything good at anything, it was a witch hunt.
Yeah.
So I think you had said earlier, either in the show prep, but during the show, I think you did, Martin, that over 7,000 people were arrested. 2/3 of them were executed.
Right. Oh yeah, it was.
We're talking about in the last 9 months of the war.
Yeah.
I mean, this was. Think about the manpower they had to devote to that.
And Rommel's pressured into suicide.
Yeah,
we need to talk about that because he was brought in late to it. And he didn't do anything. He was just part of.
I think it was one of those things that he was aware of it.
Yes,
but did not pass it on.
That's right. He was a little deeper than that. He had promised some support on certain things, and Hitler was devastated when he found that out because Rommel was his favorite general.
I think it was one of those things. Look, if you do it, okay. But again, I don't know the details as well. But my sense was it was if you guys do it, okay, we'll go from there. But
in Rommel's case, they had some documentation that proved
that at least he had been told and he'd been in communication,
right? And
just communication about it was it was
enough.
That's right, and it was significant enough to the point where they. But they also recognized who he was to the German people. So that's why they gave him, okay, you can go through the trial and your family will suffer, or commit suicide, we'll give you a state funeral and take care of them forever. And there's no question as to that. Yeah. It wasn't well known, of course, at the time. It was, I think they pegged it as a heart attack or a stroke or something like that is what the official word was.
And, of course, his death then, too, also leads to a lot of cloudiness about his role and so on. Yeah.
Right. And, again, doing this takes a lot, just like every time there's a purge. Because, there were purges before this.
Right. The Night of the Long Knives.
Well, yes. I mean, even during the war, guys disappear.
Yeah.
That fall out of favor.
Yeah.
And with the psychopath that Hitler was, it didn't take much to fall out of favor.
Right.
So, once again, at the most critical time, you have removed your best quality officers. The failure to assassinate Hitler, to be successful at it, hastens the end of Germany as the nation it was. And of course, then for 50 years, you have, not quite 50 years, you have two nations. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the failure of this plot leads to a lot of the post-war experience for Germans.
Right.
Because if they had won, they probably would have been able to negotiate something better than they got, because what they got was obviously, for the German people,
utter destruction.
Utter destruction.
Yeah.
There may still have been some kind of occupation. I don't know if there would have been an East Germany and a West Germany.
Yeah.
But it's all up in the air at this point because the Russians are not in Germany yet.
They're coming.
They're coming.
And that's one of the things they feared. That was another reason that clock was ticking so fast, is they recognized we've got to have time to make peace with the West before the Russians get here.
Right, and that's obviously the goal. If you do that and the West gets to Germany before the Russians, that does change the equation.
That's right.
So, now how much it changes it is the question.
I think that's the key. Because for me, again, it kind of... Again, the fascinating part of all of this to me is not that they attempted; it's these motivations. Again,
unrealistic motivations.
Yeah, it's the same idea of, okay, we can talk to the British and to the Americans, and maybe they'll let us keep all of this in the East. This unrealistic delusion that they have of they'll let us keep all of this in the East. We can clear it out of all these, quote, undesirables and colonize it with Aryans. And then we'll team up and go after Stalin and the Russians. It's crazy to me how much of that delusion persists, even beyond these conspirators. We talked about this a little bit when we talked about the submarine campaign and Karl Dönitz. There's still this delusion of, well, if I shove Himmler out of the way and keep the SS at arm's length, maybe I can talk to the Brits and the Americans, and it won't be so bad.
Too much blood's been spilled.
And they just didn't get that. Right. No, guys, it's unconditional surrender time. You are beaten. Right. That's it.
Yeah, and the other thing that, some of these guys maybe didn't have as big a clue as what was going on with the camps, but enough of them had to have known
of what
was going on. I think if anybody didn't know, it was the average soldier in the field.
Yeah.
Because they're not privy to the planning.
Yeah.
Well, you have to have a certain height to be able to see this.
And so these guys would have been able to, even if you're off in fighting on the Eastern Front in Stalingrad, maybe you're not aware of it until you get back. But once you get back, there's no way you don't know.
Yeah, they knew.
And
again,
so
Dönitz knew. Otto Remmer, the guy that kind of stomped on the whole plan, was committed Nazi even after the war.
Right. Yeah, he's the one that started the. Who was it that started? Was it him or was it somebody else that started the Nazi sympathetic political party?
I believe it was him.
I think it was him.
So, and that obviously didn't last because eventually anything related to Nazism was totally outlawed in Germany and still is.
Well, that's right. Well, but denazification was the military occupation was all about denazification.
Right.
It's what got Patton in trouble.
Right.
Because he refused to do it.
At least with Patton, part of his refusal was, some of it was, he agreed with the conspirators in that we really need to team up and fight the Russians. Part of it was, I can't get rid of everybody because there's nobody left to run anything.
That's correct. That was his argument. Yeah,
and which I think was a valid argument.
That's right.
Especially when you're coming up on the winter. But anyways, so once you take into account the fact that you've got the camps, the concentration camps, there's no way the West was going to let the country off the hook. Correct. There's just no way.
No way. Yeah.
And that's one of those fascinating things. How do you not understand that?
I think there's a mass insanity that takes place that Hitler brings upon that country. They were so wounded and so shamed by what happened.
Well,
they were able to be molded into something that was not right.
Part of it is who it was. It's not until after Israel is established as a state that anti-Semitism really starts to become a non-starter. Part of it's the effect of the absolute atrociousness of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the Jews, the Gypsies, people that respectable Europe doesn't like anyways. Yeah. Now, respectable Europe, don't get me wrong, they like the money the Jews have.
Sure.
But they don't like the Jews themselves. Yeah. There's still an awful lot of racial hatred in that sense. So for us, it's hard to wrap our minds around that.
We've grown up in a post-world behind that.
Right. It's like for us, it's hard to wrap our minds around some of the racism that our country has been guilty of in the past. It's hard to wrap our minds around the anti-Semitism that is centuries old.
Right.
Which is, again, I like to point out, look at what we have done in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
It's astounding. We've made more progress in these areas than at any other time. With the possible exception of the actual freeing of the slaves. I mean, that was the biggest step, obviously. But, but who these things were committed against, these atrocities, that's, I think, they're still in that mind that, well, they're just Jews. They're just gypsies. Nobody likes them anyway.
But what difference does it make if we cleared all of Poland of them?
Right, because nobody cares for those people. But it turns out people actually did.
Mm-hmm.
And once you go to war for a moral cause, you start realizing, oh, crap, maybe we shouldn't be, maybe all this other stuff is a bad idea. Maybe we need to be better.
Right. And I think Stauffenberg picked up on some of that. But he was still blinded by who he was.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to remember, too, that they were not looking to set up a democracy.
No. Authoritarianism, they wanted to go back to a Kaiser. Not in name, but somebody that fills that role.
Kind of an oligarchy sort of deal with them at the helm.
That's right.
And again, this whole delusion of, well, we'll try to settle things with the West and keep all of our possessions in the East.
Which is of course the same thing that the negotiators from the Confederacy did when they sent Alexander Stephens up to negotiate towards the end of the war, saying, "Well, we want to keep our slaves. What do you need for peace?" He said, "Well, give up your slaves." Well, no, we don't want to do that. You do. We dictate terms, not you. Yeah. You don't. Negotiation for peace is over. We're going to win.
Yeah. The only people who can negotiate are those who are on relatively equal terms.
Well, that's exactly right.
Because otherwise, what do you have to give?
That's right. You don't give away anything until you've won. And then that's just to prove your own generosity if you need to. Or not.
Right. Sometimes winners don't. Historically, winners never give away anything.
Yeah.
You know, World War I and II, well, really, World War II was the first war where we did not require reparations the way past wars have.
Yeah.
Now, obviously...
they didn't have anything left to
that's right.
to pay.
Right, because they had nothing left.
That's right, because everybody else had surrendered before total destruction happened. That didn't happen this time. And in many respects, because of what Stauffenberg did. Because if that had succeeded, we might have been back to World War III. Who knows when? Because Germany could have still
Yes, because they still wanted Europe to be under the power of Germany.
But I think Churchill and Roosevelt,
they would have never allowed it.
Would never have backstabbed Stalin that way.
No,
they would have.
Even though Stalin would have backstabbed them in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, but I think to them it was full victory or nothing. They wouldn't have listened to any kind of outreach.
That's correct. Yeah,
even at this point, they wouldn't have listened to
delusion.
Outreach.
The word you used earlier, delusion. That's the right word.
Yeah.
It
was this delusion that we'll put Beck in charge and 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 we'll come out like angels because we've killed Hitler and the Western Allies was nope.
That would have gotten you a lot of credit. Might have kept you from being executed.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
There was still going to be a military campaign to destroy the rest of Germany. Basically,
that's correct.
It would. I personally don't think this changes much in the outcome, other than maybe there's no Ardennes offensive in December. There's no Battle of the Bulge.
Battle of Bulge. Well,
it still just would have been the Allies pushing across France into Germany.
They would have been occupied if they surrendered, which they probably would have. Then it would have been an occupational force at that point.
Yeah.
But it's still, the destruction of Germany as a political entity is done. Speaking of being done, I think we're right at time, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Martin's
over here flashing the fingers here, and he's like, "Guys, come on, let's go!
We're going long."
Yeah, and we have to be concise today because we are under some time constraints. So, July 20th plot was a failure, but in many ways it also hastened the end of Nazi Germany.
And even as a success, maybe who knows. That would have made any difference. Anyway.
Might not have made any difference. It certainly would have made a difference in who the Allies had to deal with.
Yeah, the details would have been, but the broad strokes, yeah.
But as military men, they might have realized a lot. Hitler never realized that he was going to. I mean, I think he honestly thought he could win.
Yeah.
Even at the end, until he committed suicide. These guys probably would have realized that a lot earlier, and obviously they did, because that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to sue for peace. And I don't know. With the Allies still being on the Normandy beaches, in the immediate area. Because if you look at a map, they were still in a very tiny spot of France. If you put guys in charge who actually knew how to fight, instead of having Hitler in his madman approach to things, the West could have gone very differently. So who knows? But doesn't matter because it didn't happen. Another great example of what if, which we will be doing later on this month.
That's right.
So, Francis, buddy, what's next?
Code of Honor. The second week of the month be Code of Honor. We're doing a mini Hemingway Palooza this month, shall we say? It's not as big as our Shatner Palooza.
Whose idea was that?
Mine. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I've been giving you all kinds of grief.
That's right, but it's been something that I've been wanting to do for a long, long time, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we're going to do our heroes this month. Is going to be Hemingway, and we saw Hemingway is one of those great quotable guys. He's got so many great quotes. My God, the man knew language so well. So we said, if we're going to do Hemingway for our heroes, let's use his quotations for our Code of Honor.
It's a shame we're not doing our heroes before Code of Honor.
Yeah.
Because that would really...
kind of prime the pump.
Prime the pump, that's right. So we're going to kind of do it a little bit in reverse order, but still, for the next 2 weeks, it's going to be Hemingway. It's going to be fantastic stuff.
And Hemingway, he's an American treasure.
Absolutely.
He really is.
Absolutely. We're going to go deep with all that next month and next week and the week after, so be here.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.